The champagne was still cold in my hand when my phone rang, shattering what should have been the most peaceful moment of my life. My son's voice came through the line, dripping with entitlement and that casual arrogance only the spoiled ever master. 18 hours later, I was standing in my own foyer, watching a parade of strangers track sand across my white Italian marble floors, like they owned the place. If you're watching this, don't forget to subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from. Every week, I share real stories of betrayal, secrets, and the kind of silent revenge that makes karma look poetic. The champagne was still cold in my hand when my phone rang, shattering what should have been the most peaceful moment of my life. My son's voice, Ethan, dripped with the kind of entitlement that comes from never having worked a day for anything. 18 hours later, I stood in my own foyer watching a parade of strangers track sand across my Italian marble floors like they owned the place. No hi, Mom, no how's retirement treating you, just chaos. Suitcases thudding, laughter echoing, perfume and cologne mixing into a dizzying fog. If you're watching this, I murmured, half to myself, half to the silent camera that would later capture this story, subscribe. And tell me where you're watching from, because this, I gestured to the mess, is where peace goes to die. But let me back up to how this delicious mess began. 2 months earlier, I had signed away my life's work, Preston and Vale Marketing, the company I'd built from scratch over 27 relentless years. The buyers paid $4.2 million in cash, and after taxes, I finally had enough to do exactly what I'd always dreamed of: disappear. No more boardrooms, no more deadlines, no more pretending I didn't hear the loneliness echoing in my own kitchen at night. So I bought my dream, a beach house on the Carolina coast, 6,800 square feet of weathered cedar and glass, perched high on the dunes with endless ocean views. The kind of home where the sea itself felt like it belonged to you. I named her The Haven. For the first time in decades, I slept in, I walked barefoot on the sand, I let the sun hit my face and thought, this is what freedom feels like. 10 hours. That's how long my peace lasted before Ethan called. Mom, he said without preamble, we need you to move upstairs to the guest room. I frowned. Excuse me? He sighed, as if I was the one being unreasonable. Melissa's family is flying in tomorrow for their 2-week vacation. Her parents, her sister's family, her brother and his girlfriend. That's 12 people total. The master suite and main bedrooms are perfect for them. You'll be fine upstairs. I actually laughed. Ethan, honey, this is my house. If you want to visit, we can plan something. But I just moved in.
You don't understand, he interrupted. We already booked their flights. They're expecting to stay there. Please don't make it awkward. Make it awkward? My jaw actually dropped. This was the same son I'd raised alone after his father died when he was 16. The same boy I'd put through private school, college, and business school. The same man whose failed restaurant I'd quietly paid off. Twice. And now here he was, telling me to move upstairs in my own home because his wife's family wanted oceanfront views. Melissa, his wife, had always been polite to my face, but there was something in her eyes, a glitter of superiority she tried to mask with tight smiles and soft tones. The kind of woman who said, "Thank you so much," in a way that meant, "Know your place." I took a deep breath. Ethan, this isn't a rental property. It's my retirement home. Mom, he said, tone flattening, you don't even use most of the rooms. We'll just stay for 2 weeks. It's family. Family. The word burned. He didn't hear the edge in my silence, didn't hear the way my heart sank. When I hung up, I told myself it would blow over, that he'd call back and say he was sorry, that he'd realize what he'd just said. But instead, 18 hours later, I stood in my foyer, watching 12 people unload luggage into my home. Melissa's mother was already complaining about the dated decor. Her sister tossed her sandals on my velvet bench. Her brother dragged a cooler across the marble. And Ethan? He just smiled awkwardly like a little boy trying to keep everyone happy. When Melissa leaned in and said, "We'll take the master, hope you don't mind. The view's so lovely from there," I swear I saw red. But I didn't argue. Not yet. Because what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the woman they thought they could walk over had spent 27 years learning patience, power, and silence. They mistook my quiet for weakness. They were about to learn how wrong they were.
The first 3 days were tolerable, if you ignored the constant thud of footsteps upstairs, the smell of sunscreen baked into every surface, and the laughter that bled through the walls at midnight. By day 4, my beautiful haven looked like a beach hostel. Empty bottles lined the counter, wet towels hung off the balcony rail, sand pooled at every doorway. And when I opened my fridge, the one I had carefully stocked with fresh seafood, fruit, and champagne, I found nothing but beer cans, leftover pizza, and someone's half-eaten birthday cake. I closed the door quietly, my reflection trembling in the stainless steel. This was not a visit. This was an invasion. Ethan had taken my credit card to buy groceries, and in less than a week, he'd spent over $1,200 on imported wine, barbecue meat, and some ridiculous pool float shaped like a flamingo. Melissa strutted around the kitchen like it was hers, snapping at her sister, laughing too loud, and pretending not to notice me standing right there. "Ethan," she said one afternoon, "the dishwasher's broken again." "It's not broken," I said, setting down my tea. "You just overloaded it." She turned to me, smile tight. "Oh, I didn't realize there was a system." Her mother chuckled from the island. "Some people can't let go of control, dear." The air went thick. I took my tea and walked away before I said something I couldn't take back. That night, I found the thermostat locked at 72 degrees, the water heater running nonstop, and the outdoor lights blazing. My utility app showed a spike in usage, a 3-fold increase. I was paying for their party. But the worst part wasn't the money or the mess. It was Ethan's tone. He spoke to me the way one might speak to an elderly relative who'd lost touch with reality. Calm, patronizing, rehearsed. "Mom, you really should relax. You worry too much." Relax. The word hit like a slap. I'd spent my entire life working so he could relax. Late nights at the office, weekends spent chasing clients, missing birthdays and anniversaries, all for him. And now, in the one place meant to be my sanctuary, I was a guest in my own home. That night, while the house throbbed with music, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Laughter carried through the vents. I heard Melissa's sister giggle, Ethan's deep voice, the clink of glasses. I pressed a pillow to my ears, but the sound of their joy, their careless, consuming joy, only grew louder. Something inside me shifted that night. Not anger, exactly. Something colder, sharper. A voice I hadn't heard in years whispered, "They're not doing this to you. You're allowing it." The next morning, I made breakfast. Pancakes, bacon, fresh fruit, the kind of breakfast I used to make when Ethan was little. When everyone had gathered, I smiled and said, "Good morning! I just need to collect everyone's contributions for the grocery fund before I head to the store."
12 sets of eyes blinked at me. Melissa tilted her head. "Contributions?" "Yes," I said sweetly. "You've all been eating and drinking quite a bit. I think $200 per person should cover the next few days." Her mother gasped. "You can't be serious." Oh, I'm completely serious. I smiled wider. Electricity, water, gas. It adds up. We'll settle up later if there's extra. The silence was delicious. Ethan looked mortified. Mom, that's unnecessary. Is it? I asked, tilting my head. I retired, remember? Fixed income and all that. He exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. We'll talk about this later. No need, I said, taking a bite of bacon. I'm just treating everyone fairly. After all, it's family. Melissa didn't speak to me for the rest of the day. By evening, they'd gone quiet, the kind of silence that hums with resentment. I spent the night reading by the fireplace, pretending not to notice when they slipped out to dinner without inviting me. It should have hurt, but it didn't. It clarified things. The following morning, I woke to find Ethan in the kitchen, pacing with his phone pressed to his ear. He didn't notice me at first. Yeah, Mom's being difficult. She's losing it a bit. We might need to start handling her finances soon. My breath caught. Losing it? Handling my finances? I stepped forward, and his face drained of color. Who are you talking to? Just Melissa's dad. He's good with money. We were discussing... You were discussing my money? He hesitated, then said, Mom, you've always been too trusting. You could really use some help managing things now that you're older. Older. There it was. The unspoken insult. The justification for everything he was doing. My voice came out steady, almost gentle. Ethan, do you remember when you were 23 and the bank called about your overdraft? He blinked. What? I paid it. Just like I paid for your tuition, your car, your first apartment. But you're right. I am older now. Which means I've learned things. He frowned. Mom, you're overreacting. Maybe I was. But not for long. That night, I walked the perimeter of my property, the moonlight spilling across the sand, the ocean whispering secrets against the shore. The cool air cleared my head. I thought of every sacrifice, every humiliation, every moment I swallowed my pride for his comfort. And as the waves rolled in, I made a silent promise. This time, I wouldn't confront him in anger. This time, I would teach him. Quietly. Thoroughly. By the next morning, I had a plan. It started with the house. I checked the deed. My name and only my name filled the title line. Every utility, every expense, every account, mine. Then I called my attorney, a calm, meticulous woman named Laura King, who had helped me close my company sale. Laura, I said, I'd like to draft an emergency occupancy clause and a revised will. There was a pause. Everything all right, Samantha? Everything's perfect, I said softly. I'm just making sure it stays that way. By the end of that day, the paperwork was ready. Ethan had no idea. That evening, as the sun sank into the sea and laughter rose again from the deck, I sat alone in my study, looking out at the glowing horizon. They thought I was weak. They thought I'd just fade quietly into the background. But storms don't announce themselves. They gather, silently,
until the sky split open. And I was done being their calm.
The next week crawled by like a nightmare on repeat. Every morning, I woke to the sound of voices echoing through my home, my kitchen, as if I were some forgotten guest in an Airbnb I paid for. Melissa's mother had taken over my dining table for her morning reflections, which mostly involved gossiping loudly on speakerphone. Her sister's children left a trail of wet swimsuits from the pool to the hallway. Melissa herself spent hours posing for Instagram photos on my balcony, captioning them #blessed, #beach vibes. And Ethan? Ethan floated between them all, smiling, smoothing things over, pretending not to notice my silence growing heavier by the hour. On the 8th day, something inside me broke. I came downstairs to find Melissa frying bacon in one of my copper pans without oil, scraping metal against metal. My heart clenched. I'd bought that pan on a trip to Paris years ago, a gift to myself after my first big client deal. "Melissa," I said evenly, "please don't use metal utensils on that. It scratches." She didn't even look up. "Oh, relax. It's just a pan." Just a pan. The sound of metal against copper felt like nails down my spine. I turned away before the heat behind my eyes could spill over. In that moment, I realized something horrifying. I didn't recognize my own son anymore. He stood there, leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone, pretending this wasn't his responsibility, pretending I wasn't standing in the ruins of my own peace because of him. I walked out to the porch, clutching my coffee, the wind off the sea biting at my skin. My chest hurt, not from anger, but from the sheer weight of disappointment. How had I raised a man who thought love meant entitlement? That night, the storm came, literally. The wind howled against the glass, waves crashing hard against the dunes. I lay awake listening to the rattling windows, and something strange happened. I felt calm. The chaos outside matched the one inside me. At 2 a.m, I got out of bed, padded barefoot to my study, and opened my old company files. Years of invoices, contracts, and legal documents. Proof of everything I'd built. I used to think all that power belonged to the company. I was wrong. The power had always been in me, and I was taking it back. The next morning, I woke before dawn, brewed coffee, and watched the tide pull away from shore. It hit me then. All my life, I'd cleaned up other people's messes. My ex-husband's debt, my employees' mistakes, my son's failures. And now, I was cleaning up after his vacation guests. No, not anymore. By mid-morning, I had a plan. Not the kind of wild revenge you see in movies, the elegant kind. The kind that leaves no fingerprints, only consequences. I started with subtle shifts. The Wi-Fi mysteriously slowed to a crawl. The hot water ran cold after 5 minutes. The pool heater went off. Maintenance issue, I said with an apologetic smile. Melissa's perfect vacation began to crumble. Her sister complained first, then her mother, then Melissa herself snapped. "Ethan, can't your mom fix this? It's her house."
I caught his glance, uncomfortable, guilty, but he said nothing. Good. Let him squirm. By the 10th day, the tension had become unbearable. I moved through the house like a ghost, invisible, but watching everything, every careless word, every eye roll, every whisper when they thought I couldn't hear. They'd reduced my dream to a playground, but soon I'd remind them whose house they were standing in. That evening, as the sunset turned the sky to fire, Ethan knocked on my door. "Mom,"
he began, hesitating. "Can we talk?" I nodded, keeping my tone light. "Of course." He stepped inside, rubbing the back of his neck. "Melissa's family, they feel a little uncomfortable. They think you're upset with them." "Are they wrong?" I asked quietly. He blinked. "Mom, please, they're guests." "No," I said, setting down my book. "They're invaders, and you let them in." His expression hardened. "You're overreacting. You're being—" "Being what, Ethan?" My voice didn't rise, but he flinched anyway. "Difficult? Emotional? Old?" He sighed, frustrated. "You're making everyone uncomfortable." "Good," I said. "Maybe now they'll understand how I feel." He threw up his hands. "You always do this, turn everything into some lesson." I smiled faintly. "And you always refuse to learn." He stormed out, muttering something under his breath. The door slammed so hard the picture frames rattled. But as the echo faded, I felt nothing but clarity. This wasn't just about disrespect anymore. This was about erasure. They were trying to erase me from my own life, and I had let them. Not anymore. The next morning, I called Laura again. "Laura, I need to make some property arrangements. Quietly." "Of course," she said. "What kind?" "Let's just say I'm preparing for guests who've overstayed their welcome." She chuckled. "Understood." Within 2 days, I had everything I needed, documents that would ensure the next move was both legal and irreversible. But revenge, I knew, wasn't just about paperwork. It was about patience, timing, the art of silence before the strike. So I smiled more, cooked for them, played hostess again. Melissa's mother even commented, "See, I knew she'd come around." I did come around, just not the way they thought. One afternoon, Melissa's brother accidentally left his phone on the counter. Notifications flashed across the screen, group chat messages. My curiosity got the better of me. I glanced. The thread was titled, "Beach House Chaos." The messages were about me. "Her food's bland. She stares like a ghost. Ethan's mom is losing it. Hope she doesn't flip out before we leave." I put the phone down gently. My pulse was steady. My face calm. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just smiled. Because they'd made one fatal mistake. They underestimated what silence can do. That evening, as the house buzzed with chatter, I excused myself and stepped out onto the balcony. The sky was lavender, the sea gold, with the last light of the day. I thought about all the years I'd spent surviving, bending so others wouldn't break. But sometimes survival isn't about bending. It's about breaking them. When I came back inside, I looked around my home, my stolen sanctuary, and decided the next sunrise would mark the end of their comfort. Because revenge, I realized, didn't need to be loud. It just needed to be final. Once I decided I wouldn't scream, everything moved with the cold efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Anger is loud and messy. Revenge, the kind that lasts, is deliberate. It requires paperwork, patience, and the small cruelty of making people watch the truth arrive like a tide they can't stop. Step 1 was to make sure nothing could be taken from me again. I sat with Laura King in my sunlit study while gulls cried beyond the windows. Laura's voice was steady, her pen neat, as she explained the simplest truths: the deed, the title, the law. Everything is in your name, Samantha. You have the right to evict guests who overstay. You have the right to protect your property. She smiled, not the comfort kind, but the let's do this kind. I signed an emergency occupancy notice and a formal 3-day eviction draft. Laura also prepared a limited power of attorney clause should Ethan try to manipulate any of my accounts. Legal steps were small acts of reclaiming agency. They were also a quiet hammer waiting to fall. Next, I turned to evidence. For 27 years, I'd run a company with more spreadsheets than poetry. I knew how to put a story together with numbers. I pulled up my bank statements, printed credit card receipts, invoices from my contractors, the signed closing documents from the sale of Preston and Vale, everything. Then I cross-referenced the days the utility bills spiked, the Amazon orders for party supplies, the flight receipts Ethan had booked, all matching the timeline of their vacation. I didn't make a scene. I made a file, thick, labeled, and precise, like a ledger of betrayal. Receipts showed the groceries he claimed to pay for were bought on my cards. Messages where he discussed handling my finances were printed and timestamped. I even found a voice memo where he'd said offhand, "We'll just move her upstairs. She won't mind." I listened to it once, then deleted the file from my phone so only paper and Laura would hold the record. Paper doesn't lie. Then there were the cameras. I'd installed discrete security cameras when I first bought the Haven. Paranoia and prudence go hand in hand when you live alone on a dune. And I'd left them active. I reviewed footage, laughter at midnight, Melissa's sister dragging a cooler across the marble, shoes flung on antique rugs, a few sharp exchanges I'd missed. I clipped the relevant timestamps, converting hours of noise into moments of proof. The cameras captured what memory sometimes softens with time: faces, voices, the exact sequence of disrespect. But proof alone isn't performance. It's preparation. I needed witnesses, people who would see the facts and understand their moral weight. Enter Claire, my oldest friend and the woman who'd helped me through divorce papers, toddler tantrums, and promotions. Claire had a way of saying the obvious so others couldn't ignore it. I invited Claire to the Haven under the pretense of tea and a tour. Within minutes, she saw what I saw: a velvet bench ringed in sand, a master bedroom in disarray, the way Melissa's mother rearranged my books like they were props. "I'll be there for the day of the reveal," she said, squeezing my hand. "And I'll sit up front." She had a reporter's habit for seating, front and center, eyes sharp, phone recording. I liked that. I also reached out quietly to people Ethan had brined in the past. Old vendors he'd stiffed, employees whose invoices he'd delayed, not to ruin him, but to show a pattern. A few were bitter enough to speak. Others simply wanted to be fair. They provided testimony, dates, names, canceled checks. The mosaic was filling in. While I gathered proof, I kept the performance of the gracious hostess alive. I cooked lemon garlic shrimp and placed the biggest bowl on the table, watching Melissa's family tiptoe around my generosity. I laughed and poured wine. I set a playlist of old jazz records because I liked the way the trumpets curved against the night. They mistook my hospitality for weakness. Fine, let them think that. I had learned that the best trap is always one they choose to enter.
Small sabotage, the kind that's legal and annoyingly poetic, followed. I called the cable company and scheduled a technician's check for the guest network. The technician would accidentally change the Wi-Fi password during a routine check. I arranged for a minor plumbing repair that would slightly delay hot water in the upstairs baths. Nothing harmful, only friction, irritation, a slow erosion of comfort. I watched their irritation bloom like mold, and I set an invitation in motion. They loved celebrations. Melissa's family drank like the ocean was on tab, so I planned a grand farewell brunch, a Sunday meal pitched as my thank you to them for making the beach house lively. Ethan agreed immediately. The idea of a catered send-off swallowed his suspicion. I told him it would be small and sweet, a way to say, "You're welcome back anytime." He loved that phrase. He meant it as a charm. I used it as bait. The brunch invite did two things.
It guaranteed most of them would be present in one room at one time, and it allowed me to control the environment. I arranged for a projector. A friend working in a local gallery lent it to me under the pretense of showing family photos on the big screen. Claire would sit front row. Laura would arrive early with the official notices ready to hand to Ethan. The vendors and witnesses would come as neighbors or friends, quietly occupying discreet seats. The technician would be on call for the Wi-Fi accident I'd scheduled. Everything was choreography. But the final, most delicious layer was psychological. People like Ethan and Melissa believe in narratives where they are always charming protagonists. To dislodge them, I had to rewrite that narrative where everyone could see it. I needed to take private entitlement and render it public, to translate their casual cruelties into a language both simple and damning. Receipts, dates, voices, and a signed deed. Facts that didn't need fury to sting. The night before the brunch, I lay awake and rehearsed what I would say. Not to them, but to the room. "You are not entitled to my life," I practiced in the dark. "This is my home. These are my choices." I wanted every sentence to be calm, uninflected, as if delivering a verdict rather than a plea. Calm makes certainty contagious. Fury only makes excuses. The last piece I put into place was the personal, the one that would pierce without breaking the law. A small heirloom, a faded holiday photograph of Ethan as a boy, sand between his toes, my arms wrapped around him. I placed it in a glass frame on the mantel where everyone would see it. It was a reminder. History isn't only the things we buy, it's the people we were. I wanted them to see that someone had been there before entitlement moved in. Someone who had loved without transaction. On the morning of the brunch, the Haven hummed with false civility. The blinds were drawn just so. The table was set with the china I'd finally permitted myself to use. Claire arrived, Laura arrived, the vendors took their seats disguised as guests. I wore a dress Ethan once liked, not to seduce, but to remind him what respect looked like. As they took their seats, their arrogance unfurled like a flag. They thought this was a courtesy. They would leave with humiliation stitched neatly into the napkins. When the technician fixed the Wi-Fi and the slideshow of family photos began to play, no one noticed the quiet click as Laura removed envelopes from her bag. That click was the sound of consequences being set on a tabletop. Everything was in place. The stage was set. The tide, patient and relentless, was starting to pull away. And for the first time in weeks, calm felt like power.
The ocean was calm that morning, deceptively so. A glassy expanse stretching to forever, whispering secrets to anyone who listened. I stood by the window with my coffee, feeling its warmth against my palms, and thought, funny how peace and revenge can wear the same face. By noon, the Haven was immaculate. The marble floors gleamed, the scent of lemon polish and sea salt hung in the air. Platters of pastries, fruit, and chilled mimosas lined the buffet. It was the kind of setting people post about, all perfect smiles and sunlight. No one noticed that every camera in the house was recording. Guests began arriving, filling the space with chatter and the sound of clinking glasses. Melissa's mother gushed about the view, her sister complained about the sand in her shoes, and Ethan strutted around like a man auditioning for a lifestyle commercial. I smiled and nodded, keeping my voice soft and measured. It wasn't time yet. When everyone was seated, I took my place at the head of the table, not by accident, but by right. Ethan was still mid-story, boasting about his business ventures to Melissa's brother, when I gently tapped my glass with a spoon. "Everyone," I said, my voice carrying across the room, "before we eat, I want to show you something special." The room stilled. The projector hummed to life behind me, its light spilling across the far wall. Ethan grinned, assuming I was about to launch into some sentimental slideshow, and in a way I was. The first image appeared, a photograph of the Haven, pristine and new, the day I bought it.
My voice played softly from the speakers recorded the night before. This house was my dream, my gift to myself after 30 years of building a company from nothing. It was meant to be a place of peace until peace became inconvenient for others. A murmur rippled through the guests. Next image, a bank transfer. $3.8 million deposited from the sale of my company. Time-stamped, legal, mine. Then receipts. Groceries, maintenance, utilities, all paid from my accounts. Then came the texts. Ethan's messages to Melissa. Don't worry, she'll move upstairs. She always does what I tell her. It's her house technically, but after a while she'll get used to sharing. The silence thickened. I watched as faces turned toward Ethan, confusion shifting into dawning disgust. Melissa's cheeks blanched. Her mother's hand froze over her glass. Ethan stood suddenly, his voice too loud for the room. Mom! What is this? You're taking things out of context. I raised my hand, calm as still water. Sit down, Ethan. And he did, not because I commanded it, but because the authority in my tone was something he hadn't heard since childhood, the kind that didn't shout, but ended arguments. The next clip played, a snippet of audio from my security footage, Ethan's voice again, laughing. She'll be grateful we're keeping her company. And the place needs life, right? Who needs privacy when you have family? The footage shifted to them dragging coolers, setting up inflatables, using my living room like a public Airbnb. Gasps and whispers filled the air. I let the images hang for a moment, then turned to the audience. I'm showing you all this, I said softly, because for weeks I have been made to feel like a guest in my own home. My son, the boy I raised, the man I funded through business school, whose debts I covered, decided that my boundaries didn't matter. He invited 12 people to live here without my consent. He told me to move to the guest room. He used my cards, my space, my trust, and he thought I'd stay quiet. No one breathed. Ethan, I continued, turning toward him, you've mistaken kindness for compliance your whole life. I won't let you mistake it for weakness anymore. At that moment, Laura King, my lawyer, stood from the back row, poised, precise, and walked forward. She placed a folder in front of Ethan. These, she said, her voice smooth and deliberate, are your formal eviction notices, effective immediately. You and your guests have 72 hours to vacate the premises. Failure to do so will result in legal action for trespassing and misuse of private property. The color drained from Melissa's face. Her mother stood up, sputtering about family misunderstandings and surely we can talk this out. Laura didn't even flinch. It's not a misunderstanding, ma'am. It's a documented violation of property law. Ethan's eyes darted between me and the papers like a trapped animal. Mom, you can't do this. You're humiliating me in front of everyone. I tilted my head, my smile soft but cutting. Oh, sweetheart, I didn't humiliate you. You did that yourself. I'm just holding up the mirror. A ripple of shocked laughter moved through the room. Not cruel, but cleansing. Claire, my friend, met my eyes and nodded once. The projector screen froze on the final image, a picture of the Haven's front door, sunlight streaming in. Beneath it, the words I'd added deliberately. Peace is not a gift you take. It's one you earn. I raised my glass, my voice calm, clear. To peace, I said, and to knowing the difference between love and ownership. One by one, people stood, not all in support, some simply out of discomfort, but the message had landed. Melissa gathered her things in silence. Her family filed out awkwardly, the air heavy with shame and whispered apologies. Ethan stayed behind, shoulders slumped, a boy again, stripped of arrogance. Mom, You didn't have to, he said quietly when the room emptied. Yes, I did. I turned to face him fully. You don't teach respect with softness when someone only hears the sound of their own voice. You teach it by taking away the comfort they never earned. He nodded, tears stinging the corners of his eyes. For a moment, I almost reached for him. But mercy, I've learned, isn't the same as forgiveness. Go, Ethan. Learn who you are without my credit card. He left without another word. When the door finally closed, the silence that followed was perfect, not empty, peaceful, a silence that hummed with something sacred. I walked to the balcony, the sea breeze lifting my hair, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. The haven was mine again. That night, I watched the sun bleed into the horizon, fiery, unapologetic. Claire sat beside me with 2 glasses of wine. So, she said with a grin, so what now? I smiled. Now I start over, quietly. Maybe I'll rent to artists, writers, people who know the value of solitude. She raised her glass. To revenge? I shook my head, smiling. To clarity. Because revenge, I realized, wasn't always about destruction. Sometimes it was about restoration, reclaiming what someone tried to erase. The next morning, I opened all the windows. The air smelled of salt and lemon polish and the faintest trace of freedom. I played Billie Holiday's I'll Be Seeing You on the speakers and poured myself another coffee. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone. The ocean whispered against the shore like applause. And for once, I didn't just hear it, I believed it. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever been underestimated, disrespected, or taken for granted, remember this: silence isn't weakness, and revenge doesn't always need noise. Subscribe to Red Silk Revenge for more stories where karma whispers louder than screams, and justice always finds its way.